and thank you so much for joining today. Again, my name is Tony Charles. I'm the director of the School of the Environment and a professor in environmental science and the School of Business here at St. Mary's University. We're running a series of presentations, webinars over this academic year, and we're very pleased that you could join for this one. I'm very pleased to welcome Megan Leslie today. I think Megan is perhaps has a record as one of the most frequent speakers at St. Mary's University over the years. Megan, I'm sure you'll describe a bit of your background, but I just want to highlight that as the member of Parliament of Canada's Parliament for Halifax, where St. Mary's University is located in Mi'kma'ki, here on the east coast of Canada. Megan's been a frequent visitor to the university, and now we're doing so virtually. So as I referred to Mi'kma'ki, I do want to start off by acknowledging that we're in an unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, the Lenape, here in Halifax at St. Mary's University, and we are all treaty people. It's a great pleasure to have Megan here in a different role, I think, from the last time she was speaking to an audience at around St. Mary's University. And I should point out we have many people from other locations also joining us today. Now Megan is with WWF, and she'll tell us more about that. Today she'll be speaking to us about natural solutions, and I'm going to turn it right over to you, Megan, to start in, and we'll go for roughly 30 minutes or so. Let me just point out, though, before I do turn it over, that you are welcome to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom webinar screen to pose questions, and I and Megan will try to field as many as possible in the time following her talk. So Megan, take it away. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony. I'm pretty excited to be here today, and I really want to thank SMU School of Environment for the invitation to be here. And yes, please use the chat for questions. I'm not going to be able to answer during my presentation because I got slides and I got notes, and it's just a little too much for me to manage, but we'll come to them at the end. And I wanted to note, so I'm coming to you from Toronto. And after living in Halifax for so long, when I came to Toronto, I realized I needed to learn about the Indigenous peoples of this land where Toronto is located. And I really want to share with you a little bit of what I've learned. So I'm coming to you from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Toronto is also covered by Treaty 13, which is signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. And I also learned that Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee. And this treaty bound them to share the territory and protect the land. So it's the idea that we're all sharing one dish or sharing the same territory. And with one spoon, we have to limit what we take and leave enough for others. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty of one dish with one spoon in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And the principles of Dish with One Spoon Treaty should guide all of us, I think, when we talk about resources and the environment. And I think it's really a great concept for us to build on our discussion for today. So today I want to talk a little bit about using that spoon to refill that dish a little bit and replenish and restore nature. So my plan today is to take you through the power and potential for nature to save us. And okay, I know I'm a former politician, so I'm a little prone to hyperbole, but I'm being 100% on the level when I say this. Climate change, biodiversity loss, pandemics, these crises that we're experiencing right now, the only thing that's going to get us through all of it is nature. And nature also has the power to prevent and to reverse these things. So I'll start a little bit with a little bit about me and how I came to work on environmental issues. Because I'm the speaker, I can actually see some of the people that have joined in, and I know I recognize some names. So some of you have heard a bit about my background before, but I grew up in a small town in Northern Ontario, and we were a gold mining town. My family immigrated to Canada from Finland because there were jobs available in the mines at that time. My grandfather worked in the mines, my uncles worked in the mines. We were like a mining town. But in the 80s and 90s, the mines began to close down. And a lot of my friends moved away with their families. And my town became really desperate for jobs. So I'm going to share, if you can see that, that's a picture of Macassa Mine, where my grandfather worked and where my uncles worked. And so 80s, 90s, maybe it was early 90s, late 80s, I don't remember the exact time, but some businessmen from Southern Ontario, they smelled our desperation. And they came to my town with a proposal, and there was a proposal to fill up those empty, unused underground mine shafts with toxic waste. And they said it would create jobs. They said it would bring us prosperity. But those shafts and drifts of the mine, they ran right under our town. And my best friends at the time, Amy Morrison, Patty Mullins, we were 15. We were just girls. We were not scientists. We didn't know anything about environmental assessments or about risk mitigation, but something about the proposal sounded wrong. You know, in our 15-year-old minds, it couldn't be a good thing to have toxic waste running under our town and our schools and our hospital. So we knew that the decision, you know, it was going to be made at town council meetings. So we went out and bought black Bristol board, and we bought fluorescent yellow paper, and we painstakingly cut these letters out of the yellow paper and pasted them on the black Bristol board so they would pop, you know, and we had this message. And the message that we spelled out was, no, we won't glow. And, you know, we thought we were pretty clever coming up with that one. And the night of the town council meeting, we demonstrated in front of town council, just two of us, because Patty had to babysit. So it was just me and Amy. And it was the saddest, most pathetic little demonstration you ever did see, like two 15-year-old girls. You can't even walk in a circle when there's just two of you. So we were like, no, we won't glow. But all the media showed up. And by all the media, I mean the Northern Daily News and 560 AM CJKL. But also there was a camera crew from MCTV, Mid-Canada Television, in Timmins. And that night, town council voted against the proposal. And I knew then, as I know now, we probably didn't even have an impact on that decision. You know, everybody knew how they were voting when they went into that meeting. I get it. But it was a really incredible moment for me. It was the first time that I felt like I could be a part of something like this. It was the first time I thought, hey, I could have a say in the future of my community. I could work to make a difference. It wasn't just something, you know, that you read about other people doing. I could be a part of that. And from then on, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to work on the issue of justice, social justice, economic justice, and environmental justice. And of course, I didn't have the language for that at the time, but I knew that I wanted to work on making a positive contribution to our planet and for people. So I couldn't wait to get to university and learn more about the world and ways that I could be involved. I went to York University in Toronto. I was pretty good at school, so I did more school. I went to law school at Dalhousie, and I didn't really want to be a lawyer. The thing that was driving me was, how could I use the law as a tool for change? How could I use the law as a shield to protect us from unjust acts? Or how could I use it as a sword to strike down oppressive laws? So that's why I went to Dal. And afterwards, I worked at Dalhousie Legal Aid. I was working with low-income people, helping them try and assert their rights. And then in 2008, I ran for office. I won. That's another story entirely, but I became the member of parliament for Halifax. And again, like my reason for going to law school. I didn't make this decision out of any great desire to be a politician. It's just that I knew it could be a different way of working on environmental and social justice and economic justice. So I started off in Parliament. I was my party's housing and homelessness critic. And then for 4 years, I served as my party's environment critic, and I became deputy leader. So I got pretty immersed on the environment file, which was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. And after my electoral loss in 2015, oh yeah, I lost. So after that loss in 2015, I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew I wanted to keep doing this kind of work, working for social, economic, and environmental justice, working towards a future where people would thrive, where nature could thrive, where our planet could thrive. And I started working with WWF Canada. So I knew at WWF Canada that they understood that working on environment wasn't about, putting a fence around special places or keeping places, quote unquote, pristine and without human contact, untouched by humans. Like I knew that was not the way that they worked. They understood that humans were a part of the environment, that humans depend on the environment, and that conservation efforts are longer lasting, more effective, and they're deeper when people are involved. Now, I've been using the word they to describe WWF because I'm, sort of reflecting on my decision to join. But now I firmly say we. So we work to steward our lands based on Western science, but also on the wisdom and ecological knowledge of Indigenous peoples. We want there to be enough fish in the ocean for Indigenous fishers so they can exercise their inherent rights and treaty rights. We want there to be enough fish for non-Indigenous fishermen who depend on fish for their livelihoods. And you know what? We want there to be enough fish for the whales and the seabirds and the marine mammals. WWF knows that in order to do this, we really need to work together with community partners, scientific partners, and Indigenous partners. And that's what drew me to WWF, and that's why I'm so proud to be working here. So that's a little bit about me. What are we working on? Well, we all know that climate change is an incredible crisis facing our planet. And we have a pandemic, another crisis facing our planet. I hate to break it to everybody, but there is another crisis, and that is biodiversity loss. So the loss of biological diversity, which is really diversity of the loss of plants and animals and all the organisms that make up the world's ecosystems. So this like web of life. And if you take climate change and biodiversity loss, these twin crises, I really think these are the biggest challenges that we're facing on the planet right now. And at WWF, we're putting all of our resources into these two threats. How? Well, let me tell you a little bit about some important work we just released. So we released this report called the Living Planet Report Canada 2020. It's our latest one. And this slide is what the report looks like. You might have seen it in your social media feed. We released it in September. And LPRC, I'll use that short form, uses something called the Living Planet Index to track the status of wildlife populations. What is the Living Planet Index? It's kind of like a stock market index, the way that a stock market index measures economic performance. A Living Planet Index measures ecological performance at a global, national, or even local scale. And it offers a window into the ecological health of a region by tracking patterns of vertebrate populations over time. Okay, so in short, what we're doing is we're looking at aggregated trends in wildlife populations over time. Now, the LPRC only looks at monitored vertebrates, and I know that biological diversity or biodiversity is about more than just vertebrates. But if you'll allow me to use monitored wildlife vertebrate populations as a bit of a proxy for our discussion about biodiversity, I know it's an imperfect proxy, but that's what I'll use. So, what did we find in the LPRC? Species assessed at risk nationally by the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, COSEWIC. Some of you may have heard the term. So these are species at risk in Canada. Alarmingly, they have declined by 59% on average from 1970 to 2016. and species of global conservation concerns. So these are species that are found on the IUCN Red List of threatened species, species at risk of global extinction that live here in Canada. They've declined by 42% in that same time period, 1970 to 2016. These numbers are deeply, deeply concerning. And what it tells us is the species with the highest risk of global extinction are on the decline right here in Canada. This isn't, you know, sometimes we think about it's the rhino or the elephant, or, you know, we think of these issues as not being Canadian, wildlife loss as not being a Canadian issue, but it's an issue right here at home. So what is causing these declines? Well, our analysis shows us, that species at risk, as defined by Kosiewicz, now face 5 threats on average. This is important information for us. It's multiple threats that we're talking about. Some reptiles, like the wood turtle, face up to 7 threats on average. Threats like agricultural activity, transportation corridors, threats that cause habitat loss, threats that cause direct mortality. And these cumulative, so adding up, and cascading, so like one after another, cumulative and cascading effects of threats may be more detrimental than individual threats. And before, we've kind of done this thing where we've looked at individual threats, and we're starting to understand now we've got to look at things differently. So what are these threats that I'm talking about? Major threats to Canadian wildlife at risk include overexploitation. So the big one for that is fishing, invasive species and disease, pollution, climate change, and transportation. And then habitat. So the loss, disruption, or fragmentation of ecosystems and habitats have very much contributed to wildlife declines, particularly for rare species, species with narrow habitat requirements, and migratory species. And you'll see climate change is on that list as well. Climate change, the threat is huge. It accelerates some of these threats like invasion and disease. It alters habitat. It exacerbates a lot of the threats that you see on this list. One example, oh my gosh, I love this guy. This is a pika. This is my favorite animal because it is so adorable. This is the collared pika. They are really, really sensitive to climate variability like temperature and precipitation. They live in these tiny little patches of habitat, these alpine areas that are above the tree line. And because they live in such a little narrow space, climate change is altering the little patches of habitat, and it's leaving the pika susceptible to climate change mortality, which breaks my heart to think these little guys are dying from climate change. So it's a real thing. And we know in Canada that we are warming at twice the global average, and northern Canada is experiencing even more dramatic increases in temperature. And so as a result, we know that Arctic species like barren ground caribou and narwhal, you know, our Canada's unicorn of the sea, along with local communities. So people are also being negatively impacted by the loss of sea ice and changing availability of food and water sources. So climate change is the 4th most frequently referenced threat for species at risk in Canada, and it's becoming increasingly more frequent. Staying below that 1.5 degrees Celsius globally to curb the effects of climate change, also, it has a central relevance to wildlife conservation in Canada. Okay, a lot of what I said was probably hard to hear. Our findings are definitely hard to hear, but I want to assure you I'm not just here to talk about the problem. I am here to talk about the solution. What are our solutions? Well, first of all, there are solutions. I think that's an important thing to recognize. So across Canada, conservation organizations and conservation actions to help wildlife have been implemented by individuals, organizations, governments, industries, Indigenous and local communities. And these kinds of actions have resulted in wildlife success stories. And they really can demonstrate the power of what can be achieved. So let's take the trumpeter swan. These really big birds, they were nearly extinct in Canada in the 1930s. But after conservationists and governments took swift and substantial conservation efforts to recover the populations, those included things like land acquisition, management plans, captive breeding and introductions or reintroductions, the populations have grown in excess of 70,000 swans. And how about, oh, oops, these little guys, the puffin. Some of my team call them flying potatoes because they're not exactly graceful in the air. They're graceful in the sea. They're not so graceful in the air. So these little flying potatoes, the Atlantic puffin, they're classified by the IUCN as vulnerable globally. But here in Canada, we've seen an increase since 1970. And Canada plays an important role in ensuring the persistence of the global population. Their increase in population in Canada is a result of several factors. But a big part of it is the reduction of bycatch. So when they accidentally are captured through gillnet fisheries, so bycatch. And you can see with these kinds of success stories, they illustrate the fact that we can do it. We have done it before. We can do it again. It is possible to stop and reverse wildlife loss in Canada. But of course, we have to act fast. And you know, looking at the Living Planet Canada report with all of those threats that I was talking about, we realize we have to invest in multiple threats at once. We can't just pick one and then work on another one. We have to work on all of them at the same time. So what in the world could address multiple threats at once? The answer is nature. I think one of the answers anyway. The answer that I want to talk about is nature. So using nature, we can support both climate change mitigation and biodiversity conservation on land and sea. So this phrase on the slide, nature-based climate solutions, you may have heard this thrown around a lot lately. It's this idea of using nature to fight climate change. So I don't know if a lot of people know this. This was news to me when I learned it, but 30% of our global greenhouse gas emissions, where do they come from? You know, is it from transportation? Is it from housing? 30% of those emissions actually come from the destruction of nature. So when we drain our wetlands, when we build on our grasslands, when we dig up our peat bogs or cut down our forests or develop our coastlines, what we're doing, that carbon, you know, we hear about carbon in the trees, but it's not just in the trees, it is in the landscape, it is in the seascape, the soil, the eelgrass, the peat. And when we dig that up or transform it, we're releasing that captured carbon into the air. So we need to prevent the conversion of that nature, and we need to keep that carbon locked into the landscape and the seascape. So I build this talk at the beginning as an opportunity for us to think about our potential here in Canada specifically. So I do want to flag two incredible opportunities that we have in Canada. The first has to do with this slide. So this slide comes from the journal Nature, and they mapped out where the remaining terrestrial and marine wilderness is, intact wilderness. And we knew this was coming out. And I kind of was like, oh, Amazon's going to be huge, or, you know, parts of Africa, or, you know, jungles of Asia. Look at this map. Look at Canada. That dark blue blew our minds when we saw this map. All of that intact wilderness in Canada. We have so much of it. We have a responsibility to protect it. So that is habitat. All that blue is habitat. It is also carbon locked in the landscape. Now, imagine where the border with the US is. So if you can kind of picture it, it's at the bottom there of where we know Canada to be. There's also a heck of a lot of gray. So that gray is potential. That gray is potential for us to restore nature, to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, to lock it into the landscape and the seascape, to restore those wetlands and those kelp beds, to draw GHGs from the atmosphere and store them. And we've done the calculations. We believe that in Canada, we can get to 30% of our Paris targets through nature-based climate solutions. Just from that. It's a pretty, I don't know, it's like almost a radical idea to think that we could fight climate change with nature, but it's real. So that's what we want to, that's what we're working on at WWF, and it's a major area of focus for us, fighting climate change with nature. If we do this right, that carbon storage is also has the potential to be habitat. And for biodiversity, we need viable habitat. Creating, restoring, protecting viable habitat means that we're tackling those threats from that threat list, those threats to wildlife. So when you think back to that map, all of that gray has the potential for restoration for us. And you know, if we do it right, we have to do it right. It's not just about trees. Chief Ron Ignace from Secwepemc is on our board of WWF, and he talks about some of the reforestation schemes that happen in his area of BC. And he says they created matchboxes. It's just like one single species over and over and over again. It's not a forest. It's one species, and they're matchboxes. They're just ready to ignite. That's not what we're talking about here. And that's also not habitat. One of my experts, species experts, challenged me when I started at WWF, and he said, go up to a non-native species, a tree, and put your ear to it and just listen. And oh my God, there's this linden tree in my front yard that I can't stand. But anyway, I put my ear up to the linden tree, and it sounds nice. Like, it's quite peaceful, and I can hear the leaves rustling, and you know, okay, so it sounds like a tree. And then he said, then go and find a native species to the Carolinian zone, which is the zone that I'm in, and do the same thing. And I found an American elm. And when I put my ear up to the tree, it was like a symphony of sounds. You could hear this tree was alive. So many insects, so many birds, so many sounds of life that linden tree didn't have. So it is really important that we think about how to do this right, that it's native species that are truly habitat for wildlife, for biodiversity, to support biodiversity. So that's the first opportunity that we have here in Canada. The next opportunity I want to talk about, and frankly, it's not, you know, we have this incredible ability, but also we have the honor to take the lead from Indigenous peoples and communities here in Canada who have deep, rich knowledge about our ecosystems and who have been managing our forests and grasslands and coastlines for hundreds of years. These are First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and communities who have passed on ecological knowledge from generation to generation. We have the opportunity to learn. We have the opportunity to follow their lead. And, you know, research has shown us that Indigenous managed lands are more species rich than other areas in Canada. And they support more at-risk wildlife. That is pretty profound to think about the opportunity that is there. And there is an opportunity for organizations like WWF or HEC, for the School of Environment at SMU, and for all of us who are tuning in today. You're tuning in for a reason. There are opportunities for us to support that work, to help fund that work, to give whatever we have that can be useful to that work, to amplify it, to communicate it, the technical expertise, the mapping expertise, whatever we have. We should be supporting that work and embodying two-eyed seeing. Two-eyed seeing, as explained by Mi'kmaq elder Albert Marshall. Ewaptamug. Two-eyed seeing refers to learning to see from one eye with the strengths of Indigenous knowledges and ways of knowing, and with the other eye, the strengths of Western knowledge and ways of knowing, and using both of these eyes together for the benefit of all. So here in Canada, as conservationists, I'm assuming if you're tuning in as people who care about the environment, we need to heed the call of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and find ways that we can take steps toward reconciliation in conservation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Those were all the slides that I had prepared, but there were just a couple other things I wanted to mention about the opportunity here. So in addition to meeting 30% of our Paris targets through nature-based climate solutions, in addition to that being an opportunity to build habitat and restore habitat, protect habitat for wildlife, there is another benefit of investing in nature. And if you're ever talking to city planners or infrastructure people, they don't use the word ecosystem or habitat. They really, what they're talking about is green infrastructure. So green infrastructure, plants, trees, they absorb a heck of a lot more water in floods than concrete does. Green infrastructure is more resilient. Last summer, I had the opportunity to tour Toronto Island. There was a lot of flooding on Toronto Island, and there were a ton of insurance claims for people who had ruined basements, damaged hard infrastructure. And so we were on this one part of the island where there's all this hard infrastructure. There's a marina, there's sidewalks, there's houses built right to the edge. And there were sandbags everywhere trying to deal with some of the rising flood waters. And, there were a lot of issues there. But just down the island, where things weren't built as close, where there was no marina, there was no breakwater, and it was nature, the water was just absorbed. And at the end of the season, they lost one tree. They had to replace one tree. Meanwhile, at the other end of this same island, I don't even know how many basements needed to be fixed because of it. Concrete just steers the water in a different direction. It has a limited capacity, but a silver maple can absorb 220 liters per hour. And, back to Chief Ignatius' comment about the matchbox, when we plant a single species tree, this plantation, they burn at an astounding rate, much faster than rich, wet, natural ecosystems that are full of moss and ponds and creeks. So there's another opportunity for us when we think about the impact of green infrastructure. And then finally, I do want to think a little bit about the pandemic and the opportunities that the pandemic has brought us. I'm trying to look for the silver lining of the pandemic. And I think that it has really put the spotlight on nature. It has reminded Canadians of the importance of nature. Nature's good for us. When we get out in nature, it impacts our mental and physical health. We've seen the studies about nature schools, about forest bathing, about the nature deficit. And there's just something about being in nature that makes us feel better. It's a tangible thing we can feel without having to read the scientific data. We go out and we know it, we just feel better. So there are, I think people are paying more attention to nature in this pandemic, and there is an incredible opportunity for us with restoration, for example, because it is something that we could do while socially distanced. It is something that we can do quickly. It is something that creates jobs. It is something that can rely on Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous communities to execute. There's incredible potential for us right now in a green recovery to include nature in that. So yeah, I really do think that nature is here, can save us, whether it is climate change or biodiversity loss or how we recover from this pandemic. There are a lot of opportunities for us right now. So Tony, with that, I'll wrap up, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Megan, and we do have time for some discussion. I believe both I and you, Megan, invited questions in the Q&A, but so far I'm not seeing any. I'm not sure if we have a problem with that.
I don't see the Q&A. Do you?
Yes, I have it on my
oh, okay. I don't need to see it
here, but
you're in charge.
So if anyone has any questions, please do pose them. In the meantime, let me just start with my own to you, Megan. That was wonderful and very interesting. Because you started with some of your own background, I want to take you back to those early days of Dell Legal Aid, where you were, as you were saying, working with homeless and those in poverty. Can you make a connection of poverty problems, food insecurity issues with nature solutions that you're talking about here? You know, can you link those two together?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert in this stuff, and I think I'm more shy today to answer that question than I would have been yesterday, because yesterday I was on a panel with this amazing guy who's a medical geographer looking at exactly this issue around income and poverty and disease and access to nature. So I'm not an expert in it, but certainly there are those connections, you know, talking about people having access to nature, or kids having access to nature and being able to concentrate better in school. You know, it impacts our mental health. This is, you know, I'm taking this a couple steps further, but even the pandemic. So when we destroy nature, often what is happening is, not always, but often what is happening is we're forcing wildlife to flee, to find new habitat, or to make do. And we're pushing wildlife closer to human populations. And often in those human populations, there's also agriculture, which pushes wildlife into closer contact with domesticated animals. That there is disease that transfers from wildlife to domesticated animals, and then from domesticated animals to humans, zoonotic diseases. Coronavirus is one of those zoonotic diseases. And I'm thinking about in the mid 90s, you know, we saw the Nipah virus. This started in Southeast Asia, where rainforest was burned down to make way for palm oil plantations. Fruit bats needed to find habitat, so they found what they could in orchards that were near intensive pig farming. The bats infected the pigs infected the pig farmers, and 200 people died from this virus. So the more pressure, like that, if that isn't a signal that we are putting too much pressure on the planet, I don't know what is. So that's, you know, that's a particular kind of poverty, you know, and in particular places, everything is linked. Everything is linked. I mean, you know, you do this work.
Well, that's fair enough, and we do have a few questions coming in, Megan. Let me pose them. You could probably read them yourself, but I have to earn my keep here. So from Danica Van Prugi, a colleague here at St. Mary's, inspiring presentation, Megan. One of the barriers to protection and restoration of natural ecosystems are municipal regulations or policies that allow for development within these sensitive zones. How can we overcome these barriers? Do we need incentives, perhaps financial, at the local level?
Oh, okay, Danica, I'm not somebody who keeps numbers in her head from day to day, but feel free to email me if you want the actual details of this, and I'll be happy to pass them on to you. Yes, we need perhaps incentivization, but another way that we can think about this is doing sort of the cost analysis of some of this work. So we're working right now in the St. John watershed, Woolostook in New Brunswick. And St. John River, if you can picture it, like it's just all these tiny little municipal communities, and each one is its own municipality. And you might think that they all talk to each other because they're on the same river, but they don't, because they're worried about like getting things done within their own municipality. Every year or every decade, there's a flood. But in the past decade, there's been a flood every year. So there's this realization, hey, we need to figure out how we deal with these floods. So we're working with all these municipalities and Malseet First Nation and other community stakeholders, and bringing everybody together to talk about how do we manage this together. And some of these ideas around, hey, do we need this concrete breakwater, or should we plant native species here? But we brought in this organization. I wish I could remember their name, but we brought in this organization to do some costing of things for us. And there was, oh my goodness, they did an analysis of this part of the river that demonstrated we could either keep that being nature and actually restore some of the nature back to how it was originally for flood mitigation. Or we could spend, and this is the piece I can't remember, is like how many millions, but it was millions of dollars. And these municipalities are like, oh, that's obvious. Okay, we're going to plant some more trees and we're not going to put in, the breakwater there. It's this, sometimes I find the incentivization is the wrong way. It's like, oh, there's an infrastructure fund. We should apply for it to build something concrete, build something out of concrete. It's like municipalities are being incentivized to do the wrong thing, where this organization, this consultant that we were able to bring in was able to show, no. In fact, do the opposite and you'll save money. Not only will you not have to spend that money, but you'll save money. So there's all kinds of ways of looking at this. Another piece that, incentivization and then being able to do that kind of costing analysis. Sometimes when you're looking at smaller municipalities, and there are a lot of small municipalities in Atlantic Canada, honestly, sometimes someone just needs to send the email and bring the Timbits. And it might sound like I'm being flippant, but like everybody's doing this work on the side of their desks. They're running a municipality with limited resources. And, I don't want to trivialize the work of our people on the ground on the St. John River project, but like the big door opener was us being able to book the room, send the email, bring the coffee. And people were like, oh, thanks. We've been meaning to do this for years. So yeah, all kinds of different ways to get in with those municipalities and work with them.
Thanks, Megan. Another question, this one from Larissa Sweeney. Hi, Megan. Thank you for such a promising talk and focusing on some of the solutions. I'm wondering if you recommend how environmental scientists and conservationists can form meaningful collaborations with Indigenous groups and successfully employ two-eyed seeing in the world of Western science.
Yeah. Okay. So what I would recommend is looking at the ICE report. So the Indigenous Circle of Experts report. Co-chairs were Danica Littlechild and Eli Enns. And they did an extraordinary job pulling together a framework for what Indigenous-led conservation can look like, but importantly, they have recommendations. And so this list of recommendations is fantastic. I don't have them committed to memory, but some of them are as simple as like, fund it. If you've got access to funds, figure out how to direct those funds. Some of it is, creating ethical space, bringing in Indigenous voices. So if there's anything I can recommend, it is to grab that ICE report. You know what? I think I even have it open in a browser right now because I look at it so often. And I'll try and put it, I'll put it in can I put it in the chat? Do I have the power to do that?
I think you might have that power.
Okay. So I'll put it in the chat and start there. It's fantastic. And like I said, the recommendations, I think they start on page 56. Obviously, I was looking at it recently. They're fantastic. Okay. Chat. Let me do this. Chat. Oh, look. Hey.
The wonders of technology.
It's a lot to wrap my head around, but yeah.
Okay, well, let's go to another question. Geographically defined protected areas are also vulnerable to climate change, which may result in ecological changes within their borders, which may in turn have an influence on the species they were established to protect.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for addressing this? For example, establishment around climate refugia or flexibility of borders?
Yeah, I know this is a webinar, and so there isn't the ability to talk to people. Whoever wrote this, I'd love to just ask you, yes, what do you know? And can you share it? Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. Climate refugia, so this idea that there are places that will be more resilient when climate change starts changing ecosystems, that these areas may have the potential to be refuges. That's where the word comes from. Planning out protected areas based on those refugia are really important. We've done something called the Wildlife Protection Assessment, and we've mapped out where those climate refugia are in Canada. And I think that refugia should be absolutely a part of any plan for protected areas. I will point out that Tuvayuatuk, so formerly known as the last ice area, this is a place where it will be the last ice area on the planet, the last area that is 365 days of the year ice. And that's really important for ice-dependent species. And this is a new marine protected area, and it's very exciting because it's a climate refuge. The flexibility of borders is not something that I have a deep knowledge of, but it's certainly, I know that all of us in the conservation movement are talking about that. You know, what does it mean? Hey, let's look at the right whales, because all of that work that conservation groups and individuals put into, and the shipping industry put into changing those shipping lanes in the Bay of Fundy, and then one year the right whales didn't show up. And then they were in the Gulf of St. Lawrence where that work hadn't been done. So that's a perfect example because they're following food. So how, you know, can we look at protected areas as being a thing that exists at a moment in time? And that change, or have flexible borders, or maybe not even flexible borders, maybe go with the species. These are certainly things that we're thinking about. And I'm gonna put in a link to the Wildlife Protection Assessment, so you can see where we've mapped out the climate refugia as well.
I fear that we're going to have lots of reading after this.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, now here's a question, a good one for a former politician. It ends up as, what can we do as citizens? So let me pose this one from Nicholas Taloni. It seems to me that the Canadian government is already aware of the role of nature in reducing greenhouse gases reflected in the Pan-Canadian framework. And there's a bunch of measures that are in place to protect and restore marine and terrestrial habitat. My question is, what else can we do as citizens?
Okay, I'll start with the hyperlocal, and then I'll go back to the high level. Hyperlocal, you can, everybody loves their rhododendrons in Nova Scotia, man, but they're not native. So I'm not saying tear out your rhododendrons, but if you have access to space, whether it is at your own home, a balcony, if it is at your workplace, if you have access to space that could introduce one native species, you know, can you consider planting one native species? It's the gateway drug, right? And then maybe from there we go bigger. At your workplace, maybe there's a parking lot, maybe there's a stream behind the parking lot or a little creek behind the parking lot. Can your workplace look at pulling back the parking lot a little bit and creating a bit of a buffer zone and working as a team to renaturalize that stream? Look at, you know, the success of daylighting the Sawmill River in Dartmouth. There are rivers and streams all over Canada that are paved over. What if we brought them to life through working as communities? So I'm getting a little bigger, right? You work with your neighborhood, you work with your community, you work with your municipality and say, hey, when we're planting on the median and the highways, can they be plants that are supposed to be there, that can be food for pollinators, for birds? So getting slightly bigger, you know, then I would say join organizations, become a member, get their emails. I don't even care if you donate. Donating's great, but get their emails so you can know what's going on and be informed. Maybe you find a group where you're like, yeah, I really identify with that group. Also, join a group that you don't identify with. Maybe their tactics make you a bit uncomfortable, but you're like, oh, I got to learn about this. Or maybe it's a group where you're like, oh, I don't see myself there, but I want to learn. From there, I want to bring it to the macro. And people are like, oh, voting's so important and send a letter to your MP. But like, honestly, it works. Look at last fall. So last fall, we had Greta Thunberg leading young people to say, let's get out, let's organize climate marches. And all over Canada, I think it was the largest direct action in Canadian history. All over Canada, people marched, not just young people, but young people led. That was in the middle of the election campaign. And we ended up with a minority government. Love it, hate it, I don't care. what we did do as citizens is we roundly rejected the one party that denied the importance of climate change. And every party was scrambling to be like, geez, what's our climate plan? Here's our climate plan. Like everybody, like the parties responded, and we ended up with, it was such a clear message from voters that we're not going to settle for anything other than action. So from planting a native species to getting involved at your community level to, yeah, I know voting is just like one day and one act, but being able to get there and get that message, all of it matters.
That is great. Thank you. Megan, I've just been told that the couple of items you sent in the chat didn't go to all attendees.
Oh, you know why? Because I'm sending them to all panelists, and you and I are the only panelists.
So I've been enjoying them, but maybe send them again?
Thank you to whoever flagged that. I appreciate it. So should be there now, the first one. Second one.
Great.
Awesome.
And if we can continue pumping you with more questions here, how do we as aspiring conservationists push, when there's been clear cuts of the forest, how do we push for stopping one species tree planting and at least get a large variety of native tree species planted instead? This is, of course, if harvesting of the forest is unable to be stopped.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say my answer to that would be a little bit in the vein of my answer to the last question around our ability to push for something different. So, you know, I will tell you, it's only been a year. And what is this? This is October. It's only been a year that we've had this new government. So remember all the party promises in the last election. The Liberals promised planting 2 billion trees. And you would think, oh, WWF is probably really happy about that. We weren't. We were like, oh, God, that's going to go badly. Because we kind of didn't trust that they knew what that meant or what it should mean. And so a number of nature organizations and conservationists have been putting a lot of pressure on them, sending emails, sending information about like, yes, but this is what we mean when we talk about the potential for nature-based solutions. And it's interesting, even in the period of a year, we've seen their language change. And in the throne speech says, blah, 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 and we're committed to nature-based solutions, including planting 2 billion trees. So it's interesting. In 1 year, it's sort of been turned around. And Minister Wilkinson, who's with Environment and Climate Change Canada, he spoke at a webinar recently, and I heard him talk about it that way too. So that's helpful for changing the mind of government. Will that be helpful for changing the minds of private industry? Probably not. But there is going to be money attached to this. And there's going to be incentives for private industry as well to not just plant those single species. So, you know, every time you sign one of those petitions, you're like, oh my God, why am I signing this? Does this really matter? It does. It does. Like, I'm not going to ever tell you that if you put your name on a petition that like, oh my God, everything's changed and it's fixed. But it matters. It adds up. And even that switch on the 2 billion trees and what it means in the period of a year is like, yes, okay, they're getting it. This is good.
Thanks, Megan. We're running out of time a little bit. We may not get to all the questions, but if we could just try one or two more, if that's okay.
Yeah. I'll be shorter.
Okay, well, no problem. Alana Westwood asks, in terms of limited resources, how would you think we should split our efforts in terms of protecting large tracts of relatively undeveloped areas in the north versus restoration of highly impacted areas in the south?
Yeah. Hey, Alana. Nice to see you here. Great question. And I think we need to do exactly what you said. We need to split our efforts. I mean, large tracts of habitat are what we need. In our strategic plan, we have committed to, 3 very large tracts of viable habitat, ensuring that there's viable habitat. So they're very important. But like where I live in Toronto, so from Toronto south, that's the Carolinian zone, this ecological zone, and it is a quarter of the population of Canada, and it is where most of the species at risk are because the quarter of the population of Canada lives here. So we've challenged ourselves to tackling this issue, not just being like, oh, the North will save us. We've got to do our work in the South as well. It is going to be hard. In the Carolinian zone, 90% of this landscape is privately owned. We're not going to get a big park, so we're relying on those little creeks in the parking lots, we're relying on people's balconies. But we have to do both because the number of species at risk in southern areas is astounding.
Thank you. Maybe if we can fit in a couple more here from Brian Noble.
Yeah.
Does WWF help address the efforts of Indigenous peoples to protect their beyond reserve lands, especially when development projects pose threats? What's the nature of shared relationship in those territories?
Yeah. Hey, Brian. So we do. Now, we are a national organization, and we're pretty big, but we're not so big that we can literally be everywhere. So we have had to, what we've done to prioritize where we work is we've mapped out in the wildlife protection assessment, we've mapped out where the species at risk are, where the carbon is in the landscape, where the climate refuges are. And we've had to choose priority areas. So we're working in specific areas. One area where we're working is in Southern James Bay, Hudson Bay area, Mushkegowuk Council. We're working with them to actually calculate what is the carbon in these peat bogs, in these peatlands, because if it gets dug up, it will literally be setting off a carbon bomb. And so if we can calculate the carbon, then we can, understand better stewardship, understand how this fits as habitat as well. So the shared nature of the relationship there is these are Mushkegowuk Cree lands, and it's their project. We have technical expertise. We can do the mapping, we can do the mapping. Also, if we can add our name to a funding proposal, and it helps to show, hey, look, WWF's involved. If we can, use our communication efforts. The question we're trying to ask ourselves is how can we be useful to Indigenous-led protection that's happening on the ground? And first and foremost, that's the way we prioritize our work now. I'm going to say now because we need to own up to the fact that it was not always that way. But we take our lead from Indigenous peoples on the ground trying to do, whether it's protection or restoration. Yeah. Thank you.
It is time to just about wrap up.
Yeah.
But let me say two things. It seems that some still were not able to see those links.
Oh.
So don't worry about it, Megan. Let me just
Okay.
mention that we will send out the links after the webinar, so that those who have been taking part will be able to get them. I'm going to close with one last question, and I've been following them in the order they arrived, and I apologize to those who didn't get their question posed. But this one is the wrap-up question for you, Megan. This is sort of the ideal one for you to close on. Very inspiring talk. It gives me hope for the future. Is there a way I can get involved in helping?
Yeah. Sign up. Show up. Ecology Action Center. I'm assuming that many people are from Nova Scotia. Ecology Action Center does incredible work, and they need people. They need people to get their emails. They need people to show up at their events. If there's a group that resonates with you, I'm going back to that. That's sort of like your gateway. You get involved by just showing up. Imagine if nobody showed up at those climate marches. We wouldn't have I don't think we'd have such, I'm not going to say strong. I don't think we'd have the better climate action that we have now than we did a few years ago, maybe would be the, so getting involved that way, showing up. And honestly, I know we're sick to death of getting emails, but those emails are important. People, you know, organizations share what they're doing and they share ways for you to get involved. Sign up to all of them. You know, you can hit delete, whatever, hit delete, but maybe you'll read one and be like, oh, cool. I'm super into that. And I'll end by saying, for wildlife protection assessment, where we map the species and the carbon and the climate refuges, honestly, put into Google wildlife protection assessment, WWF. And then the other one, put in ICE report or Indigenous Circle of Experts report. And that's always how I find them. Not
That
paid
is
for by
wonderful.
Google.
Thank you so much, Megan. You can just tell from all the questions and that there is some enthusiasm for what you're talking about. And I think some that happen to be in Nova Scotia are happy to see your face again. So thank you for sharing this on behalf of St. Mary's University, the School of the Environment here, and all my colleagues. We really appreciate you doing this, and wish you all the best with WWF.
Thanks. And I really appreciate the opportunity.
And thanks to the audience today. Take care. Bye for now.